Hello, Michael Chapman.
Hello.
Sat in the living room of your farm in Northumberland, which has been home for the last 30 years or so. But before that, you're a Yorkshireman. You were born in Hull.
No, I was born in Leeds, but I blame that on my mother. Because I turned professional when I was living in Hull, a lot of people think that's where I'm from.
Right.
But I'm actually from Leeds.
Right. And your childhood was, well, I understand one of the first reasons why you took up guitar or wanted to learn guitar was that you noticed that it was lads who had guitars had more interest from women, girls. Is that about
That was it, yeah. I mean, there weren't that many guitars around in them days, and if you had one, you were somebody special. You didn't really have to bother learning to play it, just to have one.
Right.
So I thought, all right, I'm going to have one of them.
And then
somebody told me that you had to play it with both hands. So I thought, nah, that can't be true. That makes it far too difficult. But then I got trapped by it and I just fell in love with the things.
And who were the guitar players? Was it the skiffle era?
Yeah.
Right.
Johnny Pilgrim. I had a drink with him the other day. This was the record that made me want to play.
Right.
The Viper's 10-inch LP. And I had a drink with Johnny Pilgrim the other day. Isn't that great? Because songs like that, anybody, if you could get 2 chords, 3 chords, you could play. Great.
Right. So you grew up in Leeds, and you went to junior school there, and it was presumably a grammar school that you started taking the guitar seriously.
Well, I took it into history lessons because I didn't like the history teacher. I took it just to annoy him, really. That's where I kind of learnt my first chords were in history lessons.
Actually, whilst he was teaching?
Yeah, just...
Right, and when
we didn't get on.
And which school was that?
It was Coburn High School in Hunslet in Leeds, which is now just rubble.
Right. And then when did you actually decide, I want to do this in front of people?
I went to art college, and there was a lot of jazz around. And just because I could play, somebody said, "Oh, come and play with us." And it then started spreading. Other people got interested, you know. And I had a skiffle group, of course, because everybody did have it. Then I got introduced to New Orleans jazz by a guy called Ed O'Donnell. And he had a house. He was married. He was the male model at college, actually.
Right.
So you very rarely saw him with his clothes on. But when he was dressed, he used to go around to his house, and he had Jimmy Rogers records and Kid Ory records, and you know, all the old-timey stuff.
Right.
I just fell in love with the whole deal. Leadbelly records, I was entranced. You know.
Yeah. Right, so Ed O'Donnell was a male model at art college, and
he kept playing me all this stuff, which was... Because you didn't hear things on the radio in them days. You know.
Right. I
mean, it's just Rosemary Clooney and how much is
family
that doggy
favourites.
in the window. And,
yeah.
And you'd hear a jazz record just every now and again if you were lucky.
Right.
Until I figured out that I had a deaf grandmother about 4 miles away. And I used to walk once we got a television, my dad had that on, so I used to walk to my grandmother's house to listen to the radio, to the Goons. And when messing about with her radio, I got all these European stations, including American Forces Network, and I started hearing Hank Williams and John Coltrane and Miles Davis and Charlie Parker. And again, it was just like, oh, I want some of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't care whether it had a guitar in it or not, but if it had a guitar in it as well, that
Right.
was me, like, you know.
But they were all jazz people, so your first love was jazz, yeah?
Well, jazz, anything really.
Anything
I
as
mean,
it wasn't
they were playing
Rosemary
Hank Snow,
Clooney.
as long as it was, as long as it wasn't, you know, Red Sails in the Sunset or whatever, or which is that doggy in the window, all that drivel. You know.
Right.
So, music with substance. That's what it was. You know.
Mm. But the names you mentioned there just happened to be jazzers.
Mostly,
and that was,
yeah. That was what the American Forces Network were playing a lot of. You know, I mean, they played some country stuff. Hank Snow, I can remember listening to,
Right.
but a lot of jazz.
And skiffle was your 3-chord number as far as guitar playing was concerned. So you must have been doing some homework somewhere to get to be playing jazz bands, as you were doing by the late 50s.
Well,
right?
yeah, I sort of was deputy this, that and the other. I played a bit of string bass and a bit of banjo. To my eternal shame, I actually played a bit of banjo. And so like if somebody was ill or gone on holiday, I'd get a gig with a jazz band, you know, and I learnt jazz chords, you know, first of all New Orleans chords, Bill Bailey and that, you know, which is like 6 chords in a song, isn't it? And then got to be like I Can't Give You Anything But Love, which has got like 12 songs in 12 chords in a song.
Yeah.
And you're just building up a vocabulary and a knowledge of chords from wherever they came from. And then I drifted into modern jazz.
Right, right.
And not knowing anything about music, I just made the chords up myself.
Right.
Which I've been doing ever since.
And there was a thriving, in the 50s, there was a thriving jazz scene in Leeds, wasn't there?
That's all there was. Leeds was a jazz town because the police would not allow rock and roll and Tetleys in the same building. And you forget that there was only bitter, mild and Guinness in the pubs in them days. Lager was just about unheard of. And if you didn't sell Tetleys, the pub was deserted in Leeds. Forget it. You know, I mean, John Smith didn't get a look in. But the police would not allow rock and roll and Tetleys in the same place. That's why there's never been any rock and roll bands from Leeds.
Right, right. And the jazz clubs, that was okay?
They were thriving, yeah. They were all over the place. There was one called the Esquire down at the end of Briggate, which was like open all night. Right. Even in them days, you know. I mean, I'd go out and play, and the last gig of the week would be like 1 till 7 on a Sunday morning at the Esquire. Tremendous.
Yeah, yeah. And you were playing with whoever offered you work?
Anybody.
You wouldn't tie yourself to one particular name?
I wanted to have my own band. I had a jazz guitar trio, just guitar, bass and drums, which is what I would have loved to have worked with all the time, but it's a very limited market. And I'd play with anybody, absolutely anybody. I played in this wonderful thing called the Kenneth Baxter Orchestra, which was every drunk musician in Leeds that wasn't working that night. Right. And we used to play the society circuit for all the hunt balls and things, and then posh women in long dresses and getting drunk.
Right. And that was trad jazz, yeah, that was danceable
that was
jazz.
just a dance band.
That was a dance band, right.
Semi-skilled sort of Glenn Miller thing.
But Ed O'Donnell, he had connections with Ken Collier, didn't he?
Yeah, well, you see, everybody was in awe of Ed because he'd made a record. You know, you didn't meet people that had made records. Right. And Ed had made a record. There he was on 2 tracks of a Ken Collier EP that you could actually hold, and Ed was on it, you know. Yeah. And this was astonishing to us, that we actually knew somebody who'd made a record. Right. Right. And Ed was like the father figure of it all. He always had the best. I mean, he always played New Orleans, but he always had the best band. Right. He had great players. A clarinet player who died last year, unfortunately, called Martin Fox. A trumpet player that everybody was after, called Jimmy Fuller. I mean, Kenny Ball even wanted to have a 2-trumpet band with Jimmy Fuller, but Jimmy Fuller wouldn't leave Leeds because of the Tetleys. You know? Well, sound. He's still there. And he had a great rhythm section, and Ed's rhythm section was the same as mine. They'd play New Orleans with Ed and then come out and do bebop with me on a Tuesday night, you know, when nobody else was looking. Right. And when did the move, because Muddy Waters came over to Leeds, didn't he? Did you see the Muddy Waters? I was there that night. It was astonishing. Right. Absolutely. I had never heard anything that loud in my life. Loud? Yeah. Yeah. Well, it was the Leeds Jazz Festival, you know, because it had to be cultured. All the culture vultures had to stick their 10-penneth in somewhere. And they had the Woody Herman Anglo-American Herd, which was Woody Herman and some Americans and some out-of-work English jazzers in an 18-piece band playing these duff arrangements. But you could only get a ticket for both concerts, because there was the Herman Herd on, then there was Muddy Waters. So we suffered through this dreadful big band. And then everybody left apart from about 40 of us in Leeds Odeon. And this little black man walked on, and he went round and he just gathered up all the microphones that this 18-piece band had used and dumped them in the piano. And then this bigger black man walked on, pushing a wardrobe. And then he came on and he was pushing another wardrobe. Big white wardrobes. And we thought, what's this? And then he walked on with this tiny white guitar and plugged it into these wardrobes and went tick, 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 long distance call. And it was the loudest. They were Fender dual Showmans that he'd been pushing on, white ones. And he had a white maple neck Telecaster. It looked like a match with strings on. We'd never seen anything like it. And the row was just, oh, I need some of that. It's just astonishing. And about 20 of the 40 people walked out straight away. Yeah, I was going to ask, there were some purists who just couldn't deal with the volume. Well, first of all, most of them, it was full for this big band, it was truly awful. But Muddy Waters wasn't jazz, so they all just left. And then half the people, the 40 that were left, as soon as this barrage of noise hit you. The piano as well must have been. Yeah, well, Otis Spann playing the piano, he had still all the microphones, 18 microphones in the piano, all turned on, you know, giving it full welly. It was wonderful. Right. They just played a Chicago club set. Great. And was that your conversion to the blues? You know, well, to electric blues, yeah. Right. I didn't know people did that. I hadn't got a clue.
you'd come across Lead Belly through
All the
Ed
acoustic
and stuff.
stuff, yeah.
That this was the first electric
Oh,
blues.
Yeah, can you imagine it? I mean, it hit you
Yeah.
like a brick.
Yeah.
Astonishing.
And that was the start of your passion for blues?
Well, I'd always been interested in blues because I was sitting there trying to play like Big Bill Broonzy with a flat pick.
Yeah.
But of course, nobody had seen Big Bill Broonzy play. You just heard the records. I didn't know that you could do that.
Right.
So I've got a flat pick and I'm trying to play bass. I
So-
kind of managed.
Yeah.
But then I heard Django Reinhardt, you see, and I was off and running again in another direction.
Right.
Learn Reinhardt solos by putting my finger on the record till I slowed it down enough for it to click, and then take it off and then get faster and faster.
Right. Right. And then when you finished at Leeds Art College,
Yeah.
you were at that point a pretty busy semi-pro musician, sort of working 4 or 5 nights a week.
Yeah, I mean, the guitar bought my education. Without being a guitar player, I just couldn't have got an education.
Right.
So there was just no money around in my family for people to go to college. You know.
Mm-hmm.
My mother didn't see the point either, so... me
And is it true you used to busk in Briggate, up and down Briggate?
No, it's not true.
No. You used to play up and down Briggate, yeah.
Well, every pub up and down Briggate and Bricker
Right.
Lane, yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's a one thing I've never, ever really had the confidence to do is busk. It must be the hardest trade in the world. And also it's cold.
Yeah. And then at the end of your course, which was in photography, you were qualified to be a tutor in photography, and then you came to the first sort of T-junction, if you like, in your life, where you said, right, am I going to keep playing as a semi-pro musician, or I've got a qualification here, I'm going to use it? And you actually did give up music, didn't you?
Yeah, I really wanted to be a committed teacher. I thought I would be really good at it.
So music was like a hobby at that point, a lovely
music-
hobby for you.
Yeah, I'm, as my missus says, women can do more than one thing at once and men can't. That's the difference. And so I thought, well, if I'm going to teach, I'll teach, you know, let this. And also I've moved over to Bolton. I didn't know anybody to go and sit in with or who to ask for gigs or whatever, because it all seemed to be in Manchester and I didn't have a car.
Right.
And so I just thought, oh, never mind, I'll just teach. But of course then I finished up managing the Art College rock and roll band, which you always do, don't you?
Were they good?
No, they were awful, but good fun. They're still awful. They're still together.
What are they called?
The Atlanta Roots.
Right. Right.
But boy, I taught them one thing, and that's to drink. They're just an R&B band that drinks, which is what it should be, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that got you back into music?
Well, no, not really. I mean, after 2 years, I was finding it impossible to teach. I mean, for the last year, there was a sign on my department saying, "Oh, Mr. Chapman's lectures are held in the Anchor Inn."
Did you get in trouble?
So things had degenerated by then, as you can
Right.
guess. So, and I thought, no, I'm going to get out. And also, I'd started an illicit relationship with one of my students, which you're not supposed to do when you're married. And the wife was a bit upset as well. So, before they sacked me, I resigned.
Right, right.
The words moral turpitude came in.
Moral turpitude.
Isn't that lovely? Yeah, because they could fire you for that. See? I mean, they couldn't fire you for being hopeless at teaching, but they could fire you for moral turpitude, which I thought was great.
Right.
So anyway, I legged it and finished up down in Cornwall. Walked into a folk club because I was skint one night. And I really couldn't afford to pay to go in. I just had enough money to get myself back to Bolton the next morning.
Which is what you were planning on doing. You were planning on returning and
then
looking
trying
for
to
an
sort my life
alternative.
out. Yeah, you drive trucks or something. You know, the romance of the road, whatever.
Yeah.
I'm going to drive back to Bolton, start again, you know. And
This would have been, what, 65?
66, summer of 66.
Yeah.
And the guy said, I said, oh, I'll tell you what, I'll play for half an hour. I had an acoustic with me, and I sat and played for half an hour. And he said, what are you doing for the rest of the summer? I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, we're open 6 nights a week, and I'd like you to be a resident here, which means you play for half an hour a night, and accompany anybody that comes wherever. And at the end of the week, you get a share of the profits. I said, well, lend us a tenner, and I'll stay. And at the end of the week, he paid me £2 more than I would have got for teaching for a week. Wow. So I thought, this is all right. Lie on the beach all day, play the guitar for half an hour, get pissed. I can handle this. And it's wall-to-wall girls. I can handle this. And
So you didn't go back to Bolton?
No, I played there for 5 weeks, went back to Bolton.
Which pub was it?
The folk club was a place called the Count House at Batallet, which is about 4 miles from Land's End.
Right.
It's out on the cliffs. It's a fabulous place, lovely place.
Right.
I drove back to Bolton, dropped the wife off, said I'm going out for a packet of fags, and I've never been back since.
Right.
I just got in the car and drove across the hall to see my new girlfriend.
Right.
And we're still together, so this is where we live now.
Right. So that was obviously a very big crossroads in your life. You stayed
Well,
down.
I hadn't got a clue who or where I was.
Yeah.
I was open to offers, anything. I would, if somebody had said, "Can you drive a truck to Australia?" I'd have gone, "Yeah, fine." Yeah.
It was, so in a certain way, losing that teaching job was your catapult, wasn't it? That
Getting out of that, getting out of an organised lifestyle. Yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And once in Hull, what was the music scene there? Because there's the famous Fairview Studios, which was you'll have to tell us all about that.
Great Gutter Shoals. It's on Great Gutter Lane, so we always used to call it Great Gutter Shoals.
Yeah.
It was thriving. It was absolutely heaving with musicians, was Hull in them days, because there are hundreds of working men's clubs still in Hull, but in them days they all had a resident band. Artists would come in, the resident band would rehearse with them, and they'd do the show. That was it. There's a rock and roll band on every street corner. Around where I lived, the nearest one to me was the Rats that had Mick Ronson in it. But that's not a bad start. They were just everywhere.
So you saw Mick Ronson when he was learning his stuff.
Yeah,
right.
when he was in the Rats. Yeah, we were playing Hendrix covers and Jeff Beck stuff.
Yeah.
And there's a department store in town called Hammond's, and they had a music department next door to the gardening section. And Rick Kemp was selling instruments in there. He was playing in a band that was a kind of working men's club covers band, and selling instruments during the day. And I used to go up there and take a guitar down and play, and he'd get, when the gardeners weren't looking, he'd get a bass down, and then Mick would walk in, and we'd sit there playing all day long. And so you got to know all the musicians,
Right, right.
But you couldn't go in on a Saturday, you see, because that's when the semi-pros went in.
Right.
If you're a proper musician, you didn't go in when the amateurs went in. It's a total snobbery routine.
Choose your moment. What was your first impression of Mick Ronson? Destined for big places?
I never thought about it. I just, when he was doing the Hendrix covers and things, I mean, it was just monstrously loud, too loud for a 100-watt Marshall PA,
Mm-hmm.
And, Hendrix covers are Hendrix covers, aren't they, Jeff Beck? But when he was sitting playing in the shop, he was such a melodic player. When he didn't try to be Jimi Hendrix or Jeff Beck, when he was trying to be Mick Ronson, he was such a melodic player.
Right.
And after a bit, I got my first album, and I took Rick down to play on that. For moral support as much as anything, apart from the fact that he's always been a wonderful bass player.
Mm-hmm.
Just to have somebody, so I wasn't the only stranger in a bunch of a London session then.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted somebody on my
This
side.
is Rainmaker, yeah?
Yeah.
Right.
But then when we did Survivor, I said, I didn't have any problem getting Rick on board, because Gus Dudgeon knew he could play. And they gave me this list of all these London guitar players that they wanted to use. And I said, no, there's this Gardner in Hull, he's terrific.
He was a gardener, right?
Well, the thing about Mick was that I asked him to be in my band, and he wouldn't, because he was a gardener at a girls' school. Now, if you look like Mick Ronson, you're a rock guitarist and you're a gardener at a girls' school, what else do you need? Come on. So, and Mick was a very loyal bloke. He was very loyal to the Rats, and I said, come on, we'll go on the road. And he said, no, I'll stay. And then after he did Survivor, Gus introduced him to Bowie, and then everything changed after that, as everybody knows.
Yeah, yeah. But it's going back to Fairview Studios and that 1966 when you did some of your first acoustic recordings. Yeah. You were heading down the blues route, weren't you? It was
very
folky
much so.
blues.
I was playing in folk clubs, and I was playing like blues and maybe the occasional Jimmy Rogers song, and then I'd all of a sudden get a nasty attack of Thelonious Monk or Jimmy Geoffrey or something, because I didn't know what you played in folk clubs. I just went out and played, but because I was playing acoustic, they were the only places to play, because in pub gigs with a rock and roll band, they wouldn't give you the time of day if you just played acoustic.
Right.
So forget it.
Yeah.
So that's where I finished up playing, and then I started writing songs. It had never occurred to me that people like me wrote songs.
But listening to some of those Fairview sessions, where you're doing Snook Siegling,
Big Joe Williams,
you're already, let's get the sort of timing. You're about early 20s. and you're already doing interpretations. You know, most people were doing straight covers. You know, you were doing interpretations of blues people. So perhaps, not the sort of straight CC Rider and Let Me Go Home whiskey. They're not the standard versions. So you're already sort of, maybe the jazz side had sort of freed you a bit. You know?
I think one of the people that's always interested me is Jimmy Smith, the organist. Because I've always wanted to play guitar like he plays, you know, because he plays a lot. You know, and the other guy was Mose Allison, who's a piano player. Now, for a guitar player to be influenced by them two,
right?
You know, Mose Allison's blues things, Parchment Farm, One Room Country Shack, they're just so atmospheric.
Right.
That's what gets me about songs, is the atmosphere that you can create. I haven't actually thought about interpreting blues. I thought I was just playing them. You know, it's not something that I didn't go into sort of huge intellectual arguments about deconstructing the blues or whatever. I just did it.
Yeah, no, it's just a lot of people around that. You know, a lot of the names around that time were learning Freddie King riffs. You know, mimicking and stuff like that. And you had a freer approach right from the start. You know.
Yeah, I mean, I knew kids. I mean, there were loads of lead guitar players in Hull, and one of my oldest friends is Professor Sutton, Professor Paul Sutton, who's Mick Ronson number 4. They all played Gibsons, you know, Marshalls. And he could play all the electric Freddie King riffs and everything. You know. I'm out.
Shall we cut whilst it's ringing?
It rings for ages. No, I don't really.
We'll just wait till it stops ringing.
Yeah.
Sure.
I'll just keep turning over. You've done 24 minutes.
Right.
Bloody hell.
It's going nicely.
Right,
It's going very nicely.
What I was saying, about the electric riffs. Prof was playing me Buddy Guy riffs, Freddie King riffs, Albert King riffs. But when I was working, there was a kind of a blues boom going on, which spread into the folk clubs. There was an acoustic scene going on with, you know, Joanne Kelly and Mike Cooper and all those, and especially down Bristol in the southwest, there was this huge blues boom scene, acoustic, and they all had national guitars on it.
Ian Anderson,
and they all introduced the song not by its title but by its matrix number. And I thought, hang on, what kind of anoraks are these guys?
for serious. Yeah.
This is serious, yeah. And that academic approach was
Very
not
English
for me,
Yeah.
and not for me at all.
Yeah.
So maybe that's why I never played anything. You know, I just learnt the words and I was off and running. I met my own guitar playing up.
Yeah.
I've never copied blues players.
Yeah, that blues boom, you know, the Fleetwood Mac, Chicken Shack, John Mayall, Can't Fail Blues, that was throughout the 60s. How did you fit into that? Did you watch it from the sidelines, you know, the Claptons, the Peter Greens, the Mick Taylors, the John Mayalls, you know, the Alvin Lees? Where did those guys fit in your sort of scheme of things?
They didn't really, because it was kind of electric acoustic, and never the twain shall meet hardly, you know, because to them we were folkies, and to us they were rockers. You know, I mean, I used to see them sometimes. You'd play universities or wherever, and I'd maybe be playing support. So I remember playing support to Ainsley Dunbar's Retaliation.
Yeah, John Morshead.
Who is a lovely guitar player.
Yeah.
And thinking, wish I looked like that with a black Les Paul strung round my neck. You know, what am I doing with this big J200?
What did you think of Dylan going electric?
I didn't think anything really.
It didn't sort of upset you or anything, because
no.
Did it sort of plant a seed in your head saying, for future times, this is something I might do?
No, because you see, I've always played electric and acoustic. You know, when I was playing modern jazz, I was playing electric. You know, I wanted to be Wes Montgomery or Kenny Burrell or whatever.
Yeah.
You know.
But by the time you got the Harvest deal, you were very much seen as the troubadour.
Other people, I was very much seen as the acoustic troubadour.
Yeah. How did that deal come about?
Again, I was playing down in Cornwall at a place called the Folk Cottage, which is, again, no microphones, no electricity even. I mean, it wouldn't be allowed to be. You used to get 200 people in a field in the middle of nowhere. This guy came down, and he was a lyricist with a publishing deal with a publishing firm called Essex Music. And he reported back to them. They'd just signed Ralph, I think, about a fortnight before. And I turned up, and he reported back to them, there's another guitar player down in Cornwall who's going to be really good, because I wasn't writing songs in them days. And the original deal was for me to make a guitar album. And in between signing the deal
Of your
and
own
getting to record,
instrumentals and other people's?
or whatever. I
Yeah,
don't know.
just a
'Cause
guitar
we never
instrumentals.
did it because in between times I started writing songs, and I said, no, I don't want to do anything like that. I want to do my own material now. 'Cause
How did that come about, taking the step from other people's to your own?
again, it wasn't conscious. I very rarely make conscious decisions. I just go with the flow. Like I said before, I didn't realise that people like me could write songs. I thought they just appeared, drifted in from outer space or somewhere. I really don't know. And I was driving back from a gig in Norwich. We're still living in Hull, and I got to Sleaford, and I'd had it. I was just too tired. I touched the side of the road a couple of times and scared myself. So I just pulled into a car park of a truck stop and fell asleep and couldn't get to sleep. And I just started writing lyrics. Oh, my life goes by so easy. My days they pass so well. Oh, 2 chords, that'll do. A couple of major sevenths, that'll be fine. And I suddenly realised I've written a song. And then I was hooked.
So you were writing that in your head. You didn't have a guitar.
I did a guitar and thing, but I was just writing the lyrics down. I was trying to get to sleep in the car.
Right.
First of all, it was too cold, and A35 vans are not the best things for keeping it.
Right. And then you get this deal with Harvest, which must have been very, very good news
I
for you.
signed to a production company called Tuesday Productions, which was Essex Music, who then leased it to Harvest. Well, they leased 4 albums.
4
to
albums,
Harvest,
yeah.
Which was astonishing because Harvest, without me knowing it at the time, was a big deal. I really wasn't aware of it. Because I wouldn't do what they wanted me to do. As soon as I signed, they said, right, we'll get a flat in London, move down. No. I said, how much is a flat in London? They said, oh, £20 a week. I said, well, I've got a 5-room flat in Hull for 2. No, I think I'll stop where I am, thanks. I've got a phone, just ring me up, tell me what you want. I'll be anywhere you want, but
Right.
I've never wanted to live in London, And so without me knowing about it, that Harvest thing was a big deal. To me, it was, got records out, that was lovely. It meant the difference between getting 12 quid for a gig and 18. When Rainmaker came out,
Yeah.
that's what it meant to me.
Yeah, yeah. And looking back at those, what are everybody calls the 4 classic Michael Chapman albums, do you have one that means more to you of that?
Well, Survivor always will.
To everybody, I think, isn't it? It's the one that was...
I mean, we did that album in 4 days.
My goodness.
So we must have got something right that week, because they're still buying it.
Right, yeah. And that was with Mick Ronson.
Yeah, Mick Ronson and Rick and Barry Morgan on drums. And some leftover blokes from the London Symphony Orchestra on the fiddle section.
Right. But things were moving ahead now quite fast, weren't they? You were certainly out of the small folk clubs, and you were doing sort of universities and college refectories, and so suddenly the audiences had gone from the 30s, 40s to the hundreds and even thousands. How did you adjust to that?
I just went with it. I never thought about it, because just after that, by the time Window had come out, we'd started working in Europe a lot.
Right, right.
And, apart from the fact that you drove on the other side of the road, I just went with it. I was too busy having fun to think about it. It was just... I got paid for enjoying myself. I mean, what more do you want?
Yeah, yeah. And John Peel was a great help and supporter
John helped
of
me
yours.
a lot. Everybody thought me and John were big bosom buddies. I haven't met him 4 times in my life.
Right.
He... apparently his missus, Sheila, I know he calls her the pig, but I don't like it. Her real name's Sheila. Apparently Scarborough is her favourite song of all time, and
really?
She's been ill lately, and he played it on the radio for her birthday a few weeks ago.
All right.
And apparently it's still her favourite song.
Right.
And he took to that like a fish to water.
Yeah.
And he played it because he liked it, which is what John does. You can't talk him into anything.
Right.
But I mean, it's not as though we were bosom buddies. He just played my stuff because he liked it, and everybody was going, "Oh, it's all right for you. Your best mate's playing your stuff on the radio." Like that.
Right. And through that Harvest era, obviously you were making the switch from acoustic to electric. Why did the Harvest? Why the change of record company?
They didn't ask me to stay. Yes, Alf, lie down. Sorry, I'm just talking to my dog. Alfie, bye now. that means he's bored. So, sorry, what? Alf, park. Oi! one word from me, does out he laughs. Oh, he's got bored now. No, no, Alf. You don't want to point him in the kitchen and shut the door because he's going to trip up over something. He's clumsy. He's a Labrador. He's a big head, but there's no in it. Just point him out the door and shut it behind him. Go on, Alf. No. Go on, out. Don't smile. Go out, leave. Just pull him with his collar. There's no malice in him, man. You get the idea eventually. That's it. An interruption from the animal kingdom. Push it, lock it, because he'll just put his head down and come straight through. Sorry about that.
That's all right. That's all right.
Where were we at?
Yeah. So the four classic albums from Michael Chapman on Harvest, and that takes us into the early 70s. The Harvest deal fell through. Was that the end of the folk boom, the Bridget St. John era, that kind of thing, where the singer-songwriter troubadour was very fashionable for a while, wasn't it?
Yeah, until kind of punk hit, really. You know, I mean, I moved over to Decca.
So they didn't renew your contract, and
No,
Decca
I mean,
was no problem, was
in
it?
that
They
Harvest book, they said, you know, did it feel like a family thing? And I said, well, no, because they were all in London. I was in Hull. You know,
Right. Yeah.
I've never been one for joining things. You know, I don't want to be part of it. I'm quite happy going my own way. And basically, they said, well, why didn't you stay? I said, well, if they'd said, you know, do you want another contract? I would have probably said yes. But the management guy at the time signed me to Decca, so that was bye-bye. You know,
I see, right. Right,
you know, that's why you have managers to make decisions for you.
Yeah.
I'm just busy making the music. That's all I would do.
And was there any kind of, in that move to Decca, was it seen that you would be a lot more electric, that, you know, the folk...
No, the music just went that way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We were playing bigger venues, and the problem in them days was that I would have loved to play acoustic, but I wanted it loud, and we just didn't have the technology.
Right.
You know, these guitars now are bugged up. You just plug them into a PA, a 10k rig, and away it goes. It's orchestral.
Yeah, yeah.
But in them days, we were rooted to microphones, and we had a different microphone every month because the sound guy said this is better than that and whatever.
Yeah.
You know. And feedback was always a problem. And as soon as you picked up a Stratocaster, of course, it disappeared. And then the band got bigger. And finished up in 10 of us in it. You know,
Right.
ludicrous.
Yeah. Just before we leave the folk era of Michael Chapman, what were your sort of feelings about Bert Jansch and Davy Graham? Were they innovators? Were they guys that helped you?
Do you know, I'd never met either of them.
And their music?
There's that. I mean, one of the seminal records of all time is 3/4 AD, Davy Graham and Alexis Corner, that little EP with Angie on it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's people. It made hundreds of people realise you could make acoustic records in this country.
Mm-hmm.
But Bert had a reputation for being a bit prickly, and Davy was never around because he smacked out of his brains, I presume. You know, Bert was just part of that London scene. I never was.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, people used to come up to me in the early days and say, "Oh, you play like Bert Jansch, don't you?" And I said, "Who? Never heard of him."
Right.
And then somebody played me the first Bert Jansch album, and I couldn't see it at all. I thought, no, there's nothing like each other. And it was only years later I finished up doing a 5-week tour with Bert, and that was the first time we'd ever really met. Because we were both kind of thinking, don't know about him. He was thinking exactly the same about me as I was about him, because we'd never met each other.
Right, right. So the next album, we're now totally into Decca and DRAM, and Millstone Grit.
Yeah.
Fire, Water, Dreams from that.
Yeah.
That is a Michael Chapman theme that runs from there right through to present, isn't it? Your autobiography that you were working on.
I mean, 5 Water Dreams was written on that lawn, so there used to be a bench on that lawn until a storm got it.
Yeah.
The clouds roll by like everything else. I sit on a hillside and watch them. Well, that's it there, out the front window.
Right, right. And Fire, Water as in...
Drink.
Yeah, the very strong, yeah.
They're starting to get into some fairly heavy drinking by this time.
Right, this is the mid-70s, yeah. And just talking about that album, you went to promote it on the continent, yeah. What was your kind of lifestyle at that point, apart from a lot of drinking?
A lot of travelling. I mean, we just worked all. There was so much work around in them days, and you know, I hate, if people want me to play, I hate saying no.
Right.
I do it more often these days, but I'll never be 22 again, you know.
Right.
I've had to realise that.
Yeah. And so that was the first album. So we're now going to sort of do 3 specific things for it. Deal Gone Down
Yeah.
in 1974. What was some of your high points from that album?
I think the high point was I'd produced Millstone Grit myself,
Right.
being very green at it. And I wanted to do Deal Gone Down. And my way of production is usually what a lot of people call underproducing. I like it stripped down.
Right.
And I think I got it right on Deal Gone Down. So Deal Gone Down was the first time I realised that I could actually produce records.
Right.
And that I actually knew what I was doing in a studio. Instead of, you know, but for the first 4 albums I always had Gus Dudgeon to look after everything from it. Now, Michael, come on now, it's time to stand on your own 2 feet. Get on with it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what Deal Gone Down taught me.
Mm-hmm. And which numbers from there? Any particular songs that are particular?
I'm trying to remember what song it now. Have you got the title?
Party Piece?
Oh, Party Pieces, yeah. I mean, that's about being at a party, going to the toilet and not being able to find your way back out again.
We've
Face
all
to
been
face
there.
with the door.
We've all been there.
Yeah, exactly. You know, a true drinking man's tale, if ever there was one.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just writing songs about what was happening to me, you know, and extreme things going on. It was a fairly extreme period of time. I was at the mid-70s.
Because of your lifestyle. You
Yeah.
were doing the classic rock and roll.
Yeah, go for it. I mean, it's just so much good fun, you know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
What is it, the drummer says in Spinal Tap? Have a good time all the time. We also had it tattooed across our heads.
Yeah. And Journeyman?
Journeyman is, you know, the band broke up. I fired the band in Paris because somebody stole my jacket.
Who was the lineup there?
It refers to an incident a few years before where the band was Rick Kemp and Richie Dahmer. And we were playing what's that famous place in Paris? Not the Apollo, wherever it is.
Metro?
No.
Ritz?
It's where all the big French music all-stars all used to play. Not the Criteria. I've forgotten anyway. But I bought myself a Levi jacket in a jumble sale for a shilling. Because it was beautifully worn in and everything. And at the sound check, I draped it over my chair at the side of the stage. And went to do the sound check. When I came back, some froggy had lifted it, and I went ballistic and fired the missus, the band, the road crew, all over a shilling jacket. So that's what, the band broke up in Paris, and I found my own way home with a shirt I didn't need and a car I didn't own. You know, I had to come back with my tail between my legs because they all buggered off and left me, as you would.
And the missus too?
Yeah, that's what that's about. Yeah.
Right, right.
You know, I mean, me and my temper. I don't often lose my rag, but when it goes, it goes.
Right. And Goodbye Sunny Sky?
That was just, I don't know, just to me, that's. I've never really. I don't know how that got on there.
Mm.
It's just a song. Usually, I can tell you exactly the incident that a song stemmed from. That's just a song.
Right.
And it's not like me to write things like that. I hate fillers, but I think that might be one.
Right. And moving on to 1976 and Savage Amusement.
Yeah, well, yeah. Thereby hangs a few tales.
Can you tell us some of them?
Yeah, I'd been buying anything with the name Don Nix written on it because I just loved his production. It was so beautifully defined, and I love hi-hats. And Don always had the hi-hats up real loud. And
right. And he's worked with Leon Russell and
worked with Leon Russell, Freddie King, Albert King, all those guys, and you know, house producer at Stax, the whole lot. And I'd been out on the road a couple of times after the band had gone, touring 2 years in succession, touring Europe with the support to John Mayall and playing in the band at the end of the gig and everything. And I knew that Don had done an album with John, so I rang John up in California. I said, I'm going to do an album. Do you think I could get on with Don Nix? Because I don't want to produce this time. I want somebody else's input. He says, Michael, you two were designed for each other. And then I found out what he meant. I mean, Don came over, and it's extraordinary stories. I mean, started off at Newcastle Airport. He flew in from Memphis, having taken 6 Quaaludes and a bottle and a half of brandy on the plane. Didn't really know who or where he was. And the guy he'd sat next to from Heathrow to Newcastle was a male nurse, still in the thing, who was actually going to a funeral and was upset. So Don gave him a Quaalude that he'd never had and several sips of brandy. So this male nurse didn't know where the hell he was either. And he met his relatives at the airport who were in mourning because he was going to a funeral. Well, they immediately presumed that me and Don were with them, long-lost relatives from America, and we were all hugging and things. And I don't know who the hell these people are. And that's how it started off, and it was downhill.
That was the most sane part
That
of it,
was the
wasn't
sanest bit of doing the album. I mean, people nearly died making that album. It just got extreme. We went down to Sawmill Studios in Cornwall, and after a week there wasn't a bottle of wine left in St Austell. We had to go to another town to get drink. It's ludicrous.
Right.
And then we went back up to London to mix it for a week. And then Don said, right, I'll see you. And he got on the plane and disappeared for 3 months with the tapes. He was going to, Don was ill in hospital in California, and Don was going to see him, but he didn't find him, and then nobody could find Don. And all of a sudden the album's just gone. It's got disappeared into the ether with this... As we found out later, Don was addicted to morphine and brandy at the time. And he just disappeared with the tapes into wilds of nowhere. We were ringing in Memphis, and nobody knew where the hell he was. And all of a sudden the tapes came back, mixed, finished, with hobos on it, steel guitar players. And it's one of the strangest albums, because it's like Yorkshire folk funk meets disturbed Memphis. I mean, I love it. I love the album, but it is wild. I mean, nobody knew what was going on.
Right.
We were all just raging and out of control.
So from that incident in Newcastle Airport to when the tapes went away, how long are we talking? What kind of time, as you remember it?
When they went away?
Yeah.
Oh, 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks.
Oh, right. So it was
Don
quick.
came here for a couple of days. Well, he thinks he was here for a week. If you read his book, he thinks he was here for a week, but he wasn't. Maybe it just seemed like that. Then we went down to Cornwall for a week. We were in London mixing for a week. And the trouble started when we were in London. He was staying down near, just opposite Hyde Park, off the Bayswater Road. Unfortunately, right next to the Russian embassy. And Don's a redneck, just, you know. And we started getting worried when every night when he wanted to go back, he wanted to pull up at the Russian embassy and invade it. One of my favourite, Don is a source of rock and roll stories, but my favourite Don Nick story, and I think it's my favourite rock and roll story ever, is that we drove him down from here to Cornwall, and it was a 24-track studio, and they just had it Dolby. Dolbys were brand new and very expensive. And Tony Cox, the studio owner, was showing us around, and he said, and of course we've got, every track has got its own Dolby, and he showed us that. And Don just looked up and he went, Dolbys, turn those motherfuckers off, they're a commie plot. Lovely.
The 1970s rock and roll.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The drum kit was up there with a forest of microphones around it. He just walked in and dumped them. You own a need, 3 in Memphis. Right, Don, fine. Got one of the best drum sounds I ever heard.
So in 1977 it was Man Who Hated Mornings.
Yeah. You see, everybody thought I was going to do another really heavy album after Savage Amusement.
Yeah.
But the albums have always depended on what I write, and the songs on Man Who Hated Mornings were mostly acoustic songs. So that's the way I went back to producing myself, and made an acoustic record. And I remember one article said the review of it was the man who was too laid back, because they all thought I'd have another really in-your-face album, and I made quite a gentle album.
Right.
Because I never do what people expect me to do. I just do what I'm going to do. That's it.
Yeah. But even around that time, the Hope and Anchor gig, you were doing electric stuff. Time is tight, so Don must have had some.
Well, that was always like what we used to tune up at sound checks, and it gradually just moved its way into the set.
Right, right. But Man Who Hated Mornings, what was your favourite track, if there is one out of that?
Probably, maybe Northern Lights, because one of my favourite musicians who's not with us anymore, a guy called Johnny Van Dyke, supreme fiddle player, The track's about 5 or 6 minutes long because there's just a long instrumental bit on the end which was supposed to be a fade, but what Johnny's playing is so beautiful I just couldn't do it. I just could not find a place to turn it off.
Right.
So I just left it, and it's just an astonishing piece of playing.
Right. Right.
And Mick Ronson's on it again. Mick came in, Mick was in trouble at the time. He'd come in from Sweden or somewhere, and all he had was the Les Paul, Mesa Boogie amp, a bottle of vodka and a Finnish girl. That's all he had in the world. And Tony DeFries was after him for 60 grand that he reckoned he would. And if Tony DeFries is after you for 60 grand, you worry. Maybe that's an edit point. Because I don't want Tony DeFries after. He's not called Mr. Deep Freeze for nothing. And Mick was in a bad state. He was confused, and he kept saying, "Who do you want me to play like? Shall I play like Jeff Beck?" I said, "No, play like Mick Ronson." "Oh, I'll tell you what, I'll play like Clapton on it." "No, play like. And I've wiped everything off except one song that he did, a Danny O'Keefe song called "I'm Sober Now," and he put a country guitar solo on it, then double-tracked it in harmony and went back to playing crap again. It's I wanted him to play all over the album, but there was just nothing worth keeping. He was in such a mess.
Right.
And then I never saw him again for years.
Mm-hmm.
Just disappeared from whence he came.
Right. Right.
But at the time, he was in a real mess. But his playing on that track is just stunning.
I'm Sober Now.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Which is another drinking song. It's just that I didn't write that one.
Yeah. Going on to the 80s, you were sort of again experimenting with much longer numbers on the Heartbeat album. You were thinking very, very improvising wise. Yeah.
Well, that Heartbeat one, I mean, I'd never done an instrumental album until then. You know, considering that a lot of people think I'm a guitar player. You know, I mean, I just do what I do. And I'd come up with this idea. I was doing stuff called Catwalk. My wife has a knitwear business, and she was doing fashion shows and things. But all the music was always too fast. It was always like Billy Joel disco things, which didn't suit her clothes at all. So I made her a tape at a tempo that the models could walk at for her clothes. And of course, because DJs are thick, you have to make it at the same tempo. So it didn't matter where they started it, the beat was still the same.
Right, right.
So I made this thing half an hour long with the guitar playing changes, but the beat never did. And then I turned it into Heartbeat. But of course, I couldn't have done that until the advent of CDs, because I didn't want to have to turn it over. I didn't want to split it in the middle. It had to be continuous.
Right.
And Coda, bless their cotton socks, gave me the chance to do it. You know, I mean, I never got rich out of it, but at least I did it.
Yeah. And a totally new approach to recording
Yeah.
and songwriting.
Yeah.
And all kinds of styles of music there. It ends in very raunchy sort of rocky stuff, but all kinds
Yeah, there's
of
all kinds of stuff on there, but the actual beat never changes. It's the same tempo all the way through.
Right, right.
Again, it's playing atmosphere in a way.
How was the lifestyle around this time? The 70s rock and roll, drinking days, were they?
No, they'd gone on far too long. By the time I did Heartbeat, I was out of control. Heartbeat, in a way, it took a month to record down in this lovely house down on the south coast. In Crowhurst. Beautiful house. And it had this Japanese recording studio in it that had been put in regardless of cost. It was astonishing. But the story about the house is lovely because it was actually built by an English admiral. And on the south coast, you would think it would face south to the coast, wouldn't you? No, it faces north. Because he wanted the French to be able to see his arse while he was getting dressed in the morning. Now, only the English could come up with an eccentric like that. Isn't that lovely? I love that. Sorry, where were we?
Out of control. Out of control.
Yeah, but I kind of cleaned my act up for a month while I was doing it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because I was working with Tom Newman, who's a great producer. But Tom had got this thing in them days about doing office hours. So we were starting at 10 and finishing at 7. At 7 o'clock at night, I mean, what else do I do but go to the pub, you know, that's neat, you know. So I was drinking, I was only going to the pub at night, you know, not drinking all day and every day.
Right.
But of course, as soon as I came back and started again, I went on tour in Germany to do a solo tour, finished up in jail, came back, and, you know, the missus was leaving, and then the whole thing, my life just fell apart, basically.
This was, the drinking got you in jail, or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'd broken I'd cracked 3 ribs, so I was doing a lot of painkillers, and a bit too much to drink, couldn't find the hotel in a dark street in Germany. I got out of the car to have a word with somebody, and I got paranoid about something, and I just hit him. But he was a cop.
You chose your man.
Yeah, perfect, Michael, perfect. So that kind of, my life sort of caved in at that point, and I'd slowly put it back together again over the next year.
And in the early 90s, you had health problems?
I had a couple of bad one really bad heart attack, and then none of them are good fun, by the way. I can't recommend it. Which has kind of made me sit up and take notice that we are all mortal, actually.
Yeah. And in the 90s, the Navigation album, that was mid-90s.
Yeah. Unfortunately, a couple of people thought after the first heart attack that I was actually dead, which is not a great career move unless you're a black blues player. For a bald-headed Yorkshireman, it's bad news. So it took me a while to get working again. I couldn't work for a year after the heart attack, after the first one. And, the reputation, Amy's dead, isn't he? It didn't do any good, really. Mm. So I was working anywhere, just bars for 50 quid out, just to play again.
Right.
Just kept on going. I basically have to start again.
And your novel, the autobiography, Firewater Dreams, did that start around this time?
That was at the same time. Mm. But this guy down in Colne, Lancashire, had a tiny little record company, and he believed in me.
What was his name?
Thanks, Adrian. His name's Adrian Mellin. He's now an alcoholic mess. But at the time, he believed in me, and he said, well, look, the reason I've got a record label is because I want people like you on it. And he put the money up to do an album. He put a 60-odd day tour together to promote it, and then all of a sudden I'm got my head above water again.
Great.
So thanks, Adrian. I owe him a favour, but he's such a drunk these days.
And more recently, Americana.
Yeah.
Trips to America and playing in interesting bars in San Francisco. Plough and Star.
Plough and Stars, yeah, the Tractor in Seattle. I just like to play.
It's an Irish bar, isn't it, the Plough and Star?
Plough and Stars is not just Irish, it's IRA. I'm the only Englishman allowed in there. It's just a great place to play. People like music, I'll play. I don't mind. And the Americana thing was, again, an instrumental idea that I had. Just because I'd been spending quite a lot of time in the southern states. I'd go and roll into Tennessee and see Don Nicks, and then drive down to Alabama and Mississippi into the swamps and the Everglades and just had all this swampy sounding music and put it into an instrumental album. And I've just done Americana 2, which has moved to the southwest. It's all, whereas Americana 1 is all swampy and kind of a bit out of focus. This is all really hard-edged desert. Kind of sounds.
Would you ever go north on this musical trip?
Yeah, but not in winter. I don't do cold, and I don't do big cities.
And that's how the future is going to shape up. It's travelling.
Yeah, because the thing about Americana 2 is that it's got a book of photographs with it, which took me about 10 times as long to do the photographs as it did to do the album.
Right.
Which is the way of things, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I've got another project that I want to do called Abandon, which is driving around America photographing the things that Americans throw out, which are extraordinary. And I'm talking to Northern Arts and a few people to see if I can get some travelling money to just drive around America for a couple of months, just photographing people's bins.
And that might happen this year? Yeah.
Well, whenever I get the money, I'll go, yeah.
All right. Michael Chapman, fully qualified survivor. Thank you very much. It's been great meeting you.
Thank you. That was painless. I enjoyed that. Sometimes I don't.
Thank you. Cheers.
Nice one, Jet.
Rock and roll,
Yeah.
Yeah, is that all right?